Hello everyone, welcome back to Lit Meals. Today's video is going to be about Australian poetry. इस वीडियो में हम डिस्कस करने जा रहे हैं अबाउट इट्स फीचर्स, उसका ओरिजिन, उसकी क्या इन्फ्लुएंसेस थी दूसरे कंट्रीज से, दूसरी कल्चर्स से, and how it grew. We will be discussing about the poets in the next video, so do check that out. This video is simply going to be about the features of Australian poetry. So let's begin. सो टेक अ लुक एट दिस पिक्चर. आप यहाँ पर देख सकते हैं जो पार्ट्स रेड में है, दैट एरिया मेनली डिनोटेड एज साउथ ईस्ट. तो ऑस्ट्रेलिया का जो पॉपुलेशन है मेजरली कंसिस्ट ऑफ द पीपल हु माइग्रेटेड, जिन्होंने साउथ ईस्ट एशिया से ऑस्ट्रेलिया आकर सेटल की. या सो दिस इज़, ये मोस्टली माना जाता है. पर अगर हम कुछ फैक्ट्स की बात करें तो एज यू कैन सी हियर, कैप्टन कुक ही डिस्कवर्ड द रूट. इंग्लैंड से ऑस्ट्रेलिया को लेकर जो रूट है लेट 18th सेंचुरी में उन्होंने डिस्कवर किया था. और कैप्टन आर्थर फिलिप ने सिडनी के शोर में, मतलब ऑस्ट्रेलिया में, यूनियन जैक फ्लैग को अनफर्ल किया था ऑन 26 जनवरी. यूनियन जैक इज़ द नेशनल फ्लैग ऑफ यूनाइटेड किंगडम और इसी दिन को ऑस्ट्रेलिया डे भी माना जाता है. नेक्स्ट आप देख सकते हैं माइकल मेसी रॉबिन्सन. वो एक कन्विक्ट थे, यानी कि उनको दोषी माना गया था फॉर समथिंग ही हैड प्रॉब्ली डन. और जब उन्होंने ऑस्ट्रेलिया में लैंड किया उनको पार्डन कर दिया गया, यानी उनको माफ़ी दे दी गई. और इसी वजह से उन्होंने एंड लाइक ही हैड कंपोज्ड some odes etc. in the Sydney Gazette. Sydney Gazette is a newspaper, जो ऑस्ट्रेलिया का न्यूज़पेपर is Sydney Gazette. and उन्होंने कुछ odes लिखी थी to celebrate George 111 and Queen Charlotte. So इन सब से आपको एक बहुत brief idea मिलता है that there was a lot of British influence in Australia since day one. तो जैसे कि आप देख सकते हैं this was the reason कि British poetry का बहुत बड़ा impact था on Australia. इट वॉज फाउंड बाय ब्रिटिशर्स. जैसे कि यू नो कि भारत को ब्रिटिशर्स ने आके कॉलोनाइज किया था. दे ट्राई टू रूल द इंडियंस जस्ट लाइक दैट. इन द सेम वे ऑस्ट्रेलिया में भी सेम चीज़ हो रहा था. तो ऑस्ट्रेलियन पोइट्री का आप एक मेजर चीज़ जो डोमिनेंट आपको दिखेगा इवन फ्रॉम द टाइम ऑफ फर्स्ट सेटलमेंट इन 1788 टिल फर्स्ट वर्ल्ड वॉर तक आपको उसमें यूरोपियन इन्फ्लुएंस बहुत देखने को मिलेगा, एज कमेंटेड बाय जूडिथ राइट. जूडिथ राइट इज ए ऑस्ट्रेलियन poet. She had commented this particular thing. Now these are some of the Australian poets, as you can read. W.C. Wentworth, Charles Harper, Henry Kendall, Dale Gordon and A.B. Patterson, Ada Cambridge. Like I've said earlier, we'll be discussing these in another video. इस वीडियो में करेंगे तो वीडियो बहुत लंबा हो जाएगा. Let's move on with the rest of the features. So like we've discussed earlier, ऑस्ट्रेलिया एक ब्रिटिश कॉलोनी था, जिसका मतलब है the Britishers were ruling Australia. They were trying to set colonies there. उनका वहाँ पर राज चल रहा था. उनके cultures dominant थे, उनके officers superior थे. So a lot of the literature that was written was in favor of the British Empire. क्यों? क्योंकि they were very very big officers. And the people of Australia originally, in order to live there, to survive, उनको ऐसा लग रहा था as if these British people are our ultimate, they are our boss and they are on top of us, and hence we have to agree to them, we have to sing in praises of them. So most of the literature during that time was very much colonially inspired. Means बहुत ज़्यादा British culture, British temperament you will get to see in Australian poetry. The next thing that you will get to see is the flora and fauna of Australia, which means बहुत सारा landscape you will get to see in the poetry. जैसे कि यहाँ पर example दिया गया है in Barren Fields poem, which is Botany Bay Wildflowers. You will notice a lot of features. For example, उसमें appreciate किया गया है the sandstone which is near Sydney. Then he mentions about kangaroos etc. So उनका पोएट्री के थ्रू से भी जो अप्रिसिएशन था, a lot of it was very even locally inspired, not only just British but also it was very locally inspired. They were appreciating their own landmass, their scenic beauty of that particular land, which is Australia. The next thing what we come to is Australian identity. So most of the people, like we have discussed earlier, were migrated not only from Southeast Asia but even वहाँ पर settlements थी, British settlements थी. So all the people who were living over there, they of course they started to feel homesick क्योंकि वो इतने बड़े लैंडस्केप में ऐसी जगह में आके इतनी दूर रह रहे थे. Initially slowly they started to grow attachment to that place and to that particular land, and this is how उन्होंने मिलके Commonwealth of Australia 1901 में भी फॉर्म किया. And in most of the poetry you will get to see a spark of the real Australian identity, which is they started to identify themselves as Australians, as people of this particular land. Even though initially it was slightly difficult, and it was mainly because they were from another country, another place altogether, so it might have been difficult, but initially they did discover a type of attachment to the land, and उन्होंने accept करना शुरू किया ऑस्ट्रेलिया के लैंडस्केप को. ये चीज़ एक बहुत बड़ी recurring theme थी in the poetry. Just like we have talked about attachment, we are also going to discuss about estrangement and alienation. Alienation, which also means जो अलगाव की जो भावना होती है, means as if you feel like you do not belong to this particular place, you do not belong to this particular land. तो ये जो expression था वो भी poetry में दिख रही थी. It was not just that they stayed at this place and they started growing attachment and that's all that they mentioned. No, they also spoke about the alienation, the problems, जो deep sense था, जो poets को overcome करना था. They tried to overcome these things also through poetry, and all of these features, all of these things formed a major part of Australian poetry. The next thing we have in line is mateship, as in mate means दोस्त. So ये जो दोस्ती धीरे धीरे लोगों में बढ़ने लगी between strangers, between people who are traveling, who are settling. So जो bushmen थे, even जो travelers थे, जो shores के side में they used to settle down, they used to camp. So slowly there started to grow a deep sense of mateship. उनमें दोस्ती बढ़ने लगी, and even this thing is also visible in poetry. An example is also given over here. Please check it out. And last but not the least is women's voices. Now, like we have already discussed about mateship, जो कि एक तरह का ग्रोइंग फ्रेंडशिप था, दोस्ती था जो दिख रहा था, बट इट वॉज मेनली अ मैस्कुलिन फिनोमिनन. इट वॉज मेजरली पॉपुलर बिटवीन द मेल्स बिकॉज दे वर द मेन who were usually traveling or settling or whatever professional wise, that those were the things that they were doing. Lekin they were not the only people in the society. There were also women. However, जो women's participation था, it was not quite popular. वो around 19th century popular आई, it came to light, वो ज़्यादा दिखने लगी. उसमें जब women's voices, women's writing started to come into light, it portrayed the sufferings of women. We can see one of the examples in Lawson's poem, which was lines written during a night spent in a bush inn. And she has discussed a two-way thing. It is not very lopsided, as in उन्होंने सिर्फ suffering ही नहीं discuss किया है, बल्कि she has also discussed about women's attachment to the countryside of Australia. So all of this poetry goes two ways. It's not only about किसी particular चीज़ का, landmass का बुराई करना, और it was not like that. It was not biased. It was very, very general, as in it discussed the good and bad of that particular land, especially that land in which they were trying to live in. अगर हम conclusion पे आए, so we are supposed to focus on one particular thing, and that is इतने सालों के लिखने के बाद, all this poetry that has been written all this while, slowly it started to evolve and it started to develop, especially during the 19th century. Especially after World War, it did start to take a major turn. But if you are talking about the origin times of poetry, then उसमें British poetry, British style का बहुत झलक आपको देखने को मिलेगा, उनका tradition, उनका cultures etc. However, ऑस्ट्रेलिया में बहुत convicts जो दोषी पाए जाते थे, उनको वहाँ पर ऑस्ट्रेलिया में भेजा जाता था. These British people used to send them to Australia. However, these were the people who started a new generation. These were the people who settled down in Australia. और उन्होंने एक दूसरा generation, they've continued their generations. And not just that, but also there are people who are specifically born in Australia, like some of our Australian writers like Harper, Kendall, etc. These are the poets जो खुद ऑस्ट्रेलिया में पैदा हुए थे, they are native born. These are some of the people जिन्होंने एक cultural phenomenon शुरू किया ऑस्ट्रेलिया में by trying to keep in intact its culture, its tradition, about the events जो particularly उस period of time में हो रही थी. And this is one of the major reasons why we know today about Australia's history. So that's it for today's video. अगर video अच्छा लगा हो then do let me know in the comment section, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and I will see you in my next video.